Hey guys, I'm Mike. I'm an HR prof at the Ted Rogers School of Management. In weekly videos, I talk about my most challenging HR exam questions, the ones that have stumped the students the most over the years, as well as how to solve them. So if you are in HR, have a big HR exam coming up, hit subscribe, smash the like, make sure the notification tab is turned on, and check out my weekly videos. In this week's video, I'm going to be talking about HR planning. And specifically, I'm going to be talking about HR exam questions related to the Markov analysis and the ratio analysis. In the past, my students have been so scared of these questions because they are heavily based on numbers. You need to do math in order to ace these questions. So come along and let's figure out how to solve these questions. So the first question we're going to look at is actually the ratio analysis. It is a challenging question because you're looking at data in a table year over year and you're trying to figure out what to do with it. However, it's not actually that challenging. Okay, so let's take a look at the question you have. First, you work at Blue Fruit Inc., a company that designs and makes cell phones and tablets. Okay, so kind of irrelevant, but just setting it up. I'm just going to scratch it out because it's not really relevant. You've recently been promoted to a sales manager and are reviewing sales figures before a major meeting. Again, not really relevant, but setting the scene. You notice the demand for your leading smartphone has been increasing as shown in the table. Okay, so this is your first demand has been increasing, your first sign that something's relevant. And here we go, ABC in a table at the bottom. I don't know why students get so freaked out in my HR class when you see numbers. Numbers exist in real life. So based on the table below, explain whether you're likely to have a labor surplus or a labor shortage at Blue Fruit. Okay, the company provide two solutions to address the labor shortage or surplus. Okay, so you need to do two things here. Okay, so the first one is to figure out whether you were talking about a labor shortage or a surplus. Okay, that's the big thing. So first, this is worth 3 marks. So I'd probably say 1 mark for identifying shortage or surplus, 2 marks for identifying 2 recommendations, okay? So first off, you look here, okay? So shortage or surplus is all about your labor, okay? So we don't really care about customers, we care about employees, okay? Now, since this is increasing over time, that would suggest you continuously need to hire more employees, okay? So that would suggest you have a shortage. Okay, because you constantly need to hire more people. If you had a surplus, you'd be removing people, you're trying to get rid of people, okay, which is not the case, okay? So when you're trying to bring more people on, what can you do? You can either look internally or externally. Internal solutions for labor shortages are when you're trying to do horizontal transfers, promotions, you're really trying to figure out what that gap is. And in this case, I guess we don't really specify the type of employee that we're talking about. Okay, so it's an employee. So you might have a horizontal transfer from one department to another department, or from one store to another store, whatever that might be. When we're talking about external solution is simply recruitment, and that's probably what's going to be the big case here. You're trying to bring people from outside of the organization and bring them in. Okay, so those are two of the recommendations. So based on this information, we shifted to part B. If Blue Fruit is hoping to serve the same number of customers over the next 3 years, how many employees, assuming no current employees leave the company, will need to be added or removed in June, July, and August to reach this target? Okay, so for me, when I'm answering a question like this and I have a table, this is the first thing I do. I go to the right and I make a new column. I go down below and I make the new months, or it could be years, right? But in this case, we're talking about months. June, July, August. Okay. Most of the time when these questions come up, they just say what the next year is. In this case, I try to throw people for a little bit of a loop because I'm really asking what's going on in the next 3 years. Again, that's a trick. If you get the fundamentals, you understand it, you know what to do here. Okay, so for the ratio, we know that this is a ratio style question. So when we do it is you need to calculate ratios. Okay, so here 100 divided by 110 equals something. Okay, 125 divided by 135 equals something else. Okay, you continue to do the ratio, okay, for each of the years that you have data for. Okay, that's step 1. Okay, do I have I'm going to put up the solution in a second, but I just want to, okay. So let's just do this. 176 divided by 150, 198 divided by 190, 224 divided by 220. Okay, so once you have all of those, the next important step is to figure out what the average, okay, average is. Now, in my class, we're always talking about the average here for in terms of HR planning and the ratio question. We're calculating the average ratio over years. There are more sophisticated methods used in different classes, so make sure you're aware of which method you're supposed to be choosing, whether it's a weighted average or more recent years have a higher weight than previous years. In my class, fundamentals, it's an introductory HR class. We're just looking at the average, okay? So you're gonna add up all of these, the X, the Y, all of these numbers that we calculated, and then divide, in this case, by 5, okay? So we're gonna calculate what the average is of these, okay? So X plus Y plus Z plus, A plus B, sum that, divided by 5 is a number, okay? And I'm gonna provide the solution on the following in just a second, okay? So there we go. We have the average here. Good, amazing, okay? The next thing we know is how many employees. Okay, so the other key thing from this question, you're hoping to serve the same number of customers, okay, over the next 3 months, okay? So in this case, it's kind of written poorly. I do apologize. But it's suggesting it's the same number as in May. It's written poorly, I apologize. But here, it should be the same, okay? So this is new information too, okay? So we got 224, that's what we're trying to hit, okay? And in this case, once you have this number, you maintain that same algorithm? Yeah, our algorithm, to calculate this number. Okay, so what you're gonna do to calculate it here is you go 224 divided by the ratio, which is this number, and that equals the answer for here, the total number of employees. Let's go down here. Okay, so here we got 224 divided by this 1.02, and that gives you 228. Okay, and that gives you 220. What you'll notice is because when you continuously add this number to the average, so if you were to take, let's put it this way, when you were to add another month, okay, and the next month is still maintaining the same number of customers, that average number will continue. It'll stay the same over time. Okay, so this answer for number of employees will continually stay the same, which makes sense. Okay. Now the important thing here is that you can't have 0.67 of employees. Okay, so you always round up. If it was 0.07 or 0.17, you always round up. Okay. So in this case, it would be 229 would be the number here, okay, in terms of the number of employees you need to maintain that number of customers. Since the question asks how many employees will need to be added or removed to reach this target, you go 229 minus the number of employees previously. So 229 minus 220 is your 9. Okay, so that's why you hire 9 employees, and then you don't need to hire any more employees in June, July, or August. Okay, so that's that one. Part C, assuming that there is turnover of 5 employees per month, how many employees will need to be added? Okay, so now you have kind of the steady state. You have 229 employees that are needed. You're getting rid of, you need to hire those 9. Okay. However, now you have a turnover of 5 people. Okay. So if you needed to hire 9 initially, okay, but 5 others took off, then you go 9 plus 9 plus 5, and that gives you your 14 employees in June, that first month, and then you only need to hire 5 employees for each of the 5 employees that are leaving the turnover piece. Okay. So that's part C. Okay. There we go. I think that's good. Now, Let's go to the second question. This question again. So now we're changing gears. We're going to talk about the Markov analysis a little bit. Again, this one scares people because it has like a big intimidating table with numbers, but really I kind of find these questions kind of like Sudoku a little bit, where you have a certain number, you have a correct number in a certain row and a correct number. The numbers have to sum up to the certain amount in the right row, as well as sum up to the right numbers in the right column. And as long as you understand the fundamentals, you can pretty much, people do Sudoku for fun. And that's exactly what this question is. So let's read it out. You work in a chocolate factory as the HR manager. You are conducting a Markov analysis. Okay, so again, if you're walking into this question blind, you don't know what you're talking about. As soon as they say you're conducting a Markov analysis, then well, I guess you see the table and you should really know what you're talking about once you see the table. But, determine the supply of employees for next year. Okay, that makes sense. The left-hand column talks about the current employees and the remaining columns talk about the S. So it's pretty much describing how you're supposed to interpret a Markov analysis table. So thank you very much. Let's go, part A, how many positions does the chocolate factory currently have? So for me, every time I do the Markov analysis, I always ask this question, how many positions are needed, or I'll say how many jobs are needed, because I make a big deal about what's the difference between a job and a position, right? Because sometimes people can find them very confusing as to what they are and what they are not, okay? So for me, when I do this question, I ask about how many positions or how many jobs, okay? So the left-hand column indicates the number of Okay, so for each one of these rows, it represents a different job. A manager is a job, a team leader is a job, production worker is a job, salesperson they are all jobs. The N refers to the number of positions. Okay, so in this case, if you wanted to calculate the number of positions, you add up the total number of N's. There are 3 managers, 15 team leaders, 100 production workers, and that's where we're at. Okay, 13 salespeople. Okay, so if I ask the number of jobs, then there are, in this case, 4 jobs. And the number of positions, you add these up, and the answer is 131. Now we're at the most challenging part of this question, completing the Markov analysis. It's worth 5 marks. So you look down here and you're like, oh my God, there's some cells have numbers, some cells don't have numbers. Don't freak out. Okay. The rule of thumb, okay, for a Markov analysis table, okay, the column on the left refers to the number of positions, the number of people, the number of positions this year. All of the other columns need to sum to that number. Okay? So when I see the number 2 here, and that's the only number here, I know, 3 minus 2, I know that there's going to be a 1 somewhere in one of these cells. Okay? And when I look at this column, at this row, I see 15 here, but I only see 5 here. I know that the sum, or these 2 cells, will add up to 10. It's because this entire row needs to add up to 10. So there's 15 here. I'm sorry, this entire row needs to add up to 15. 15 here, okay? And the remaining cells have to add up to 15. So 1, 2, 2, that's 5 currently showing. So we have 10 more somewhere in here. Okay, let's look here. There's 100 production workers. We need to add them so that this equals 100. And if we look at this, we're only missing 5 here. So there's going to be a 5, 5, or some combination of each. In this case, there's a 13 here, and we see 13 here. So this is a good sign. We know that the salesperson row is complete already. We don't need to touch it at all. Okay. The next big thing, so that's like the looking at the rows. Okay. The next thing that's important about this analysis is we look at the columns. Here we see the projected supply. So the projected supply is the total sum of each of the rows. In this case, it would show that when you add up each of these cells, it gives you the number. So in this case, we have the projected supply of 3, and we know that the remaining cells above it should add up to 3, and it does. So we know that these cells are going to be 0, okay? Okay, so here we look at this, it's going to be 15, and we know that there's going to be 10. Can I do this? No. There's going to be 10 in these cells other than this 5, okay? Oh, in this case, we see that 75 is already done, so we can add zeros here. Thank you very much. And then here we can see that, okay, it adds up to 15 so far, so we have 5 somewhere in these rows. Okay, so essentially what you're going to have to do, okay, is try to figure out, this is a 0. Okay, there we go. And so there's really, here's the possible cells that might have new numbers, or they might just have a 0, okay, which I guess is a number. Okay, so that's really what you have to go to from here. Okay, so here you could look up here. Okay, a 1 needs to be in one of these rows. Let's think about another one, 10. Okay, so here's a possibility. We know that 10 needs to satisfy this row somehow, and 10 needs to satisfy this column. If, possibly, let's take a guess, and we put it here. Okay, so in this case, this would make this a 0. Okay, so if we were right with putting it here, that's a 0. In that case, we know that the 1 is either going to be here or here. Okay, and let's say here we need this to go up to 100, so we need, oh, I guess it's already straightforward. It tells you what number you need to do. 85. So this would be a 5. Okay, and this is a 5, so that number would be a 0 as well, which leaves one possible option for here. So that is how you fill out a Markov analysis table that is incomplete. All right, and that is your, isn't that fun? Isn't that fun? Isn't that kind of like Sudoku? Maybe just a little bit. You can do these on the bus. Okay, part C, based on your Markov analysis, is there a labor shortage or a labor surplus for production workers, and why? Okay, so the important thing here, it's kind of like two things. So it's one, it's making sure that you understand what a labor shortage is versus a labor surplus, and then it's trying to use the table to figure out which one is relevant, and then what would you do about it. Okay, so it's kind of like a multi-tiered question that you have to understand before you can actually apply it. So in this case, we're talking about production workers. Let me just highlight that. Okay, so here we're looking at the production workers. I'm just going to bold it so we're the focus more specifically, or actually it should be this one is the one we're actually concerned about. Is there a labor shortage or surplus? Okay, so here, so this is the one. So this is the projected. Here is how many production workers we're going to have next year. Here, okay, so this is the 100 is the number that you have this year. 75 is the amount you're supposed to have next year. Okay. Now this question doesn't say whether the demand is going up or down, so you assume that it's stable. Okay. Again, a poorly worded question. Assuming that the demand isn't changing and you need to maintain the same number of workers, production workers, next year, it would appear that you have a labor shortage. That the supply of production workers is lower next year than currently. Okay, so if you have a labor shortage, right, you need to hire more. How would you do this? You either go internal or external. External, you recruit, bring new people in. The internal methods is the horizontal change or promotion. So in this case, you might say, hey, we have team leads, no, we have the same amount. Managers, same amount. Salespeople, there we go. Okay, so you have a quick scan. There's more salespeople next year than this year. You could say, hey, can I have like a horizontal shift? Can I move some of these salespeople over to a production? I know they're two different jobs, but like theoretically, if you can move salespeople over to production workers, then you might be able to satisfy it a little bit more. But given the fact that you have a gap of 25 people, no, this is not really the best solution. Here, you know, the fact that you have 15 that are planning to leave, if you can try to target those and retain them, that's probably the way that I would go. Okay, good. Part D, when considering salespeople, okay, so we're focusing on salespeople now. What two approaches may you use to improve the balance between supply and demand? Okay, so this is the exact same question as part C, just written differently. Okay, so instead of focusing on production workers, we're focusing on salespeople. Okay, so in this case, we're talking about salespeople here. So here we have 20 projected for next year and 13 this year. So we have a labor surplus. We have too many salespeople. And when you have a labor surplus, you're trying to decrease the amount of labor that you have. Okay. In the textbook, it probably talks about a hiring freeze, so you're not going to hire any more salespeople, and that slowly attrition will get rid of some salespeople. You could lay people off. You could talk about like job sharing, right? So sharing of roles. So every 2 salespeople, you have 1 salesperson job, right? There's a variety that you could go. In this case, based on organizational context, I would probably try to persuade these 2 that are trying to become people and shift them to become production workers, because that's really where the gap is. And that's it. I hope you found that helpful. All right, guys, that's it. That is my video on HR planning exam style questions. If you found this video helpful or want to learn more about HR style questions and how to solve them, hit subscribe, smash like, make sure the notification tab is turned on, and check out my videos next week.